Welcome to Pittsburgh Earth Days, The Dirt Podcast, featuring Grant Ervin, live from the Point Park University Center for Media Innovation. Here is your host, Grant Ervin.
Hello, and welcome to the latest installment of the Dirt Podcast. I'm your host, Grant Ervin, here at the Center for Media Innovation at Point Park University. And today we have a terrific guest with us from Duquesne Light Company, Christine Waller. Christine serves as the Vice President of Communications and Corporate Responsibility for Duquesne Light. Christine, welcome to the Dirt.
Thanks so much, Grant. I'm happy to be here.
It's great to see you. And I also noted that you have a shortened title since we last met. So you're now Vice President of Communications and Corporate Responsibility. Before you had ESG and Corporate Giving.
Yep.
So it rolls off the tongue a little bit easier.
ESG stands for Environmental, Social, and Governance.
That's
and
right.
The words started adding up. We figured that we could shorten that to corporate responsibility, which is all things that the company is trying to do to be a good citizen and a good member of our community.
That's awesome. That's awesome. It uses the communications capabilities, right, to kind of be a little pithy.
You got it.
So that's terrific. So welcome to the Dirt. It's great to have you here today, and we're excited to talk about Duquesne Light. We want to learn more about you and kind of the work that you've done in the company, and maybe we start there. You have a really interesting background. I noted to Anthony, who's one of our coordinators from the Earth Day Pittsburgh, that they keep putting me in with people that have media experience. And so we've had Michael Kervin, who used to host a show on WLTJ. We've had a couple other guests, that were in the media. And maybe start there. So you had some international media experience.
Yeah.
And I'd be interested to kind of learn your trajectory from that point up to your time now here at Duquesne Light.
Yeah, it sounds great. Yeah, this is a little known fact that about 15 years ago, I got picked up by one of the largest national commercial networks in Mexico to cover the Obama campaign. And the big question is, well, how did that all come about?
Right.
Right out of university, I'm a proud Pitt grad. Hail to Pitt.
Hail to Pitt.
Homecoming win this
a Gispian,
past
is that
weekend.
right?
That's right. Also, so double Pitt grad, undergrad and master's
Gispian
degree.
as well.
Yeah,
so,
very good.
Yeah.
So right out of the University of Pittsburgh, I actually had an opportunity to move to Mexico with a large global company that was in the building materials space, largely cement and aggregates. And so I moved down there with that company and got picked up while I was down there as an American who could speak fluent enough Spanish that they thought it would be interesting to have me cover U.S.-Mexico politics for a large commercial network.
Okay.
So that was a phenomenal opportunity. At the time, people in Mexico had a real fascination with the Obama campaign, and so my coverage had some focus on the 2008 campaign for Obama, and so it was a lot of fun. I did that for a little over a year, but I knew that was not the long-term gig for me. And so a few years later, I moved back to the United States and did a master's degree at Pitt. And from there, moved to the pharmaceuticals industry.
Right.
The common thread being all of these companies that I've worked for provide essential services. So I always like working for companies that have a mission focused on serving society in some capacity. So the pharmaceuticals industry definitely fit that bill. So another large global publicly traded company. And from there, I made a shift in joining Duquesne Light Company. I'm from Pittsburgh. So I have a real passion for the community here and a passion for the city.
Great company to be a part of when you're passionate for the city, for
Absolutely,
sure.
Absolutely. So when the opportunity opened up with Duquesne Light, I jumped at it. It was just such a great time to transition to a local focus, a company that's smaller in nature and really able to make a difference in the community. So I joined as Vice President of Communications and Corporate Responsibility close to a year ago.
Wow.
So coming up on my 1 year anniversary. That's right.
Congratulations.
Yeah.
It's interesting. I mean, being a fellow Gispian or Graduate School of Public and International Affairs at the University of Pittsburgh, if you're not familiar with the acronym, talk about that. I think that's fascinating. So public service has always been kind of a core from your education through your different positions that you've held. What's that been like being the public affairs person or the person that's concerned, in quote, with the public in a corporate setting? Kind of interesting. A lot of folks at GISPIA will tend to end up in the public sector. Your trajectory has always taken you through the private sector. What's that been like?
Yeah, that was a wonderful experience to be a GISPian, as you say, coming from the private sector. I was a little bit of an odd man out because it is a program that's focused on public service. But I felt that having that sensibility around, public policy and action and making a difference for society translated perfectly to the private sector. And in fact, GISPIA has a new dean in place, Dean Slaughterbeck, who has a strong belief in the role of private sector leadership in making a difference for the community. So for me, that always translated really well. And in fact, I think the people who are best serving private sector organizations in reputation-focused roles like the one that I have are the ones that are able to think most holistically around, public policy implications, community implications, legal and regulatory implications for the company's actions and behaviors and commitments.
Yeah, that's interesting. When I was at GISPIA, this goes a while back, but Sandra Williamson was one of my professors, and I loved her perspective. It was an economics class that she taught, international finance, and she worked at Mellon Bank at the time, and then BNY Mellon. And I always really enjoyed that because she saw that type of balance and was able to impart that the benefit of the public of what the company is doing. Right. And then also the flip side, like, how does the company help the public? What does that mean for you being in the pharmaceutical industry or in the media now in energy? How does some of those public policy, some of that knowledge or that value set, if you will, how do you kind of share that inside the corporate culture?
Yeah. Well, so I shared that the common thread in my career trajectory has been working for companies that provide an essential service. And I can't think of a company that is providing a more essential service than the local electric utility. For more than 140 years, this company has literally powered the progress of our city, powered the progress of Pittsburgh.
Right.
If you think about that, it was a transition to heavy industry, throughout the early and mid 1900s. And now we're powering the city's next transformation, which is toward a decarbonized economy and a clean energy future for all. Duquesne Light's in a really unique situation in that we transmit and distribute energy. Right. We don't generate energy. So that means that we're in a unique position to really bring a growing amount of renewables onto the grid and to enable that clean energy future for our for our community and for our service territory. So it's an exciting time. But again, the central theme being we have a responsibility.
Yeah.
And so we are a public service provider that is providing an essential service to the community.
That's interesting. We talked about titles and ESG and CSR, corporate social responsibility. It's in the news a lot. You see a lot of companies starting to build positions like yourself, people like yourself in positions like that inside of a company. What does that mean in practice in terms of some of the things that Duquesne is doing, either from an energy or technology aspect, or also from like the S in ESG or the corporate social side? What are some of the things that you guys are doing with your employees or customers that really kind of embody kind of this type of ethos? If you have a couple examples, I'd love to hear from them.
Yeah, I'd love to talk about that. First of all, I want to say that, although the term ESG is sort of in vogue and maybe there's an increasing amount of attention on it, my belief is that good business has always been good business.
Right.
And if you're, if you have a profitable bottom line, it's because you're thinking as holistically as possible about risks and opportunities that your company faces. Increasingly, in today's interconnected world, those risks and opportunities expand well beyond the walls of your company to include things like, a changing climate, changing weather patterns, other, positive and potentially negative environmental impacts. How are you interacting with the communities and the society around you? So for me, ESG is about having that holistic mindset in conducting good business.
Yep.
It's
really nothing new.
Nothing new, exactly. Nothing new. But I will say that, I'm really proud to be part of a company that's advancing its ESG strategy in a really programmatic way. We think about our impacts in the workplace, in the marketplace and in the community. So I'll maybe start in the workplace. We've got a strong focus on building an increasingly inclusive and equitable culture at Duquesne Light, and that includes through the basics, blocking and tackling, updating policies and procedures to make sure that they're all fair and inclusive, unconscious bias training. But, more than that, really rallying around bringing diverse perspectives to the table, innovative perspectives to the table as we're pursuing a clean energy future for all. We know it's going to take all types of mindsets, backgrounds, and creative approaches to help us get there. So we,
innovation is not just a technology. Sometimes it's a process.
Sometimes it's a process, exactly. So we've built programs around business employee resource groups that provide development opportunities for employees from different, affinity groups and other types of things. In the marketplace, we're really looking to enable our customers' clean energy future through energy efficiency programs or encouraging them to electrify their homes. And in the community, we're focused on a number of areas where we're giving charitable gifts to organizations that are focused on social and economic equity. They're focused on workforce development or sustainable communities. So we've tried to build programmatic interests that are very holistic, addressing, again, those issues and opportunities across the spectrum of our actions.
You see that, too. It'd be interesting, because you literally, the company touches all of us in the Allegheny and Beaver County area. For folks listening, that's Duquesne Light service territory. What's the customer approach? Talk about kind of your outreach to customers and kind of engaging them with beyond just flicking the switch. I've seen a lot of stuff that you guys have done in terms of education and awareness around electrification. What does that look like internally, and how do you reach customers?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I often receive another version of that question, which is, Duquesne Light is a publicly regulated business, publicly regulated monopoly. Customers don't have a choice necessarily in who's providing their electric service. We say the customer is at the heart of everything we do, and and we are in the business of delighting our customers and to be their partner of choice. We have a unique suite of products and services that customers can access. Again, like I mentioned, whether it's our energy efficiency program, customer assistance programs for lower income customers. I'm
a big fan of the box that you get as a customer for energy efficiency.
The energy efficiency kits.
Just a quick plug.
They're fantastic.
Yeah.
Visit DuquesneLight.com to order yours today. But we really want to become that trusted partner for our customers because back to this moment of transition that we're in, a clean energy future for all necessitates that more people utilize the grid's clean energy technologies. And so, how we think about becoming a customer's trusted partner by reducing their overall energy burden is a big topic of conversation we have right now because, ultimately we're here to help. We're here to provide that essential service and to meet customers where they are.
And break that down a little bit. Energy burden. I've worked with that in the past when I was at the city of Pittsburgh. This is effectively, let me get this right, the per capita cost that a household spends on utilities.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. Energy burden is defined as the percentage of gross income spent on the cost of energy for a house.
So how much you're using to electrify or to use natural gas or steam or whatever your fuel choice may be.
That's right.
Okay. And what do you see as the customers? In some parts of Pittsburgh, I would imagine across the service territory, that burden is pretty steep.
It's higher for some than it is for others. And if I go back to our vision of delivering a larger than light clean energy future for all, there is a significant focus at our company on the last two words of that vision, which is for all. If not everyone is benefiting from a clean energy future, then we're not doing our job.
Yeah.
And so a lot of our customer assistance programs are focused on ensuring that energy burden is equitable for our customers across our service territory. We're also focused on building partnerships that build that for all component of our vision and bring that to life. An example of one is a partnership that we have with the Pittsburgh Regional Transit. I'm still getting used to calling them the PRT.
Yep.
PRT. But they recently pledged a zero emissions fleet by 2045.
Yeah, super exciting.
Which is very very exciting. And that pledge necessitates some portion of their fleet being electrified. You've maybe seen some of those buses around the city. Yeah, exactly.
Right now.
So we're partnering with them on installing DC fast chargers to make sure that the electrified portion of that fleet, can run and operate smoothly.
That brings up another kind of piece of that question, I guess, too, is that all these answers to the clean energy economy and electrification or beneficial electrification for everyone aren't really easy. We're seeing this at S&B USA, where I work, and a sponsor of the program, I should also say. And we're seeing this through our e-mobility group, is that a lot of the customers we're talking to with regards to electrification of their fleets or helping to support their customers, it's a big pull. They haven't thought about the adoption of these new technologies or how do they add new service to their existing facilities. What are some ways that Duquesne Light is helping to kind of ease that burden in terms of either awareness or education, or also like how are you actually pulling the plug or the line or the wire to the system to help make that happen?
Yeah. So, the increasing access to electrified public transportation is just one example of how we have a focus on equity and the electrification of our city and the clean energy future for all. But I would say equity in how we think about the grid holistically is super important. And so,
from a resilience standpoint.
From a resilience standpoint, exactly. How we're making investments that, treat all neighborhoods and geographies of our service territory equally is really important. How we think about getting more people onto a grid that is increasingly clean is also important. We recently produced a white paper that has some really interesting research in it showing that as much as 90% of the energy that flows through our service territory's grid comes from no carbon sources.
90%? Wow.
The majority being nuclear.
Right.
So, just that education and awareness that, this region's grid is cleaner than what some
perception might be.
Exactly.
Yeah. You talked about partnerships and the community partnerships and the importance of that. What are some examples of some of those partners of folks in the community that you're working with, on the CSR side, right? Like, what's engagement look like, and who are some of those networks that the company's engaging with?
Yeah, there's a few that I'd love to highlight. So, some of the material areas that our company addresses in terms of improving the company's bottom line, but also making a difference for society, include topics like electrification, energy efficiency, increased access to renewables. And we've got some partnerships on that front that are focused on serving low-income neighborhoods and improving the quality of the housing stock in those neighborhoods. So whether it's Rebuilding Together Pittsburgh, Hosanna House, Action Housing, these are all nonprofit organizations that go in and sort of retrofit existing homes in low-income neighborhoods to make them more energy efficient, to electrify where possible, because we know that improves indoor air quality. So a lot of interesting work going on. And as you know, Grant, the housing stock in Pittsburgh is old.
It's aging, yes.
Aging.
By the day.
Yeah. I recently read a stat that was something like 60% of it is older than 100 years. So there's a lot of work to be done to sort of retrofit existing buildings to make them more energy efficient and, focused on a use of cleaner energy. So those are a couple of partnerships there. But we also know that we need to address our customers' needs in the community holistically. That's where partnerships with the food bank, for example, or workforce development partnerships with CCAC also help us to drive income improvements and opportunity for our customers.
That's a super big one there is the workforce. Like, as we transition as a society into an electrified, we'll call it an electrified platform, right? Like, you see a lot of talk in the sustainability space around the need to electrify everything, right? And that's one of the quickest ways to decarbonization, because once you electrify the system, then it's a fuel switch, right? To renewables or nuclear as good options. But building that workforce is also a huge challenge. Just last week, we were out at CCAC West, for example, and Pittsburgh Region Clean Cities, which Rick Price was here a couple months ago as one of our guests. And we were talking about the automotive space. So a lot of folks come into the automotive space and quote unquote, gearheads. That's a term of endearment, I was told. And gears are a little bit different now as we start to look at electric vehicles and, the technology and household electrification is changing. What are you guys seeing on the workforce side and building those programs, whether it's, linemen and, servicing kind of the grid or in-house electrification? What are some of those examples where Duquesne Light's stepping up to the plate?
Yeah, my mind immediately goes to the example that you highlight, which is our field crews and our line workers, our craft workers who, are out there thick and thin, keeping the lights on for people, whether that's storm restoration or a day-to-day maintenance. These crews really inspire me, and they are providing a phenomenal service to the city of Pittsburgh and surrounding areas. As we think about continuing to bring more people into that workforce, we have a training program, the Electrical Distribution Technology Training Program, which essentially is the early phase of training our line crews to become, fully fledged field workers. And this year, we were able to offer 100% scholarships to participants in that program. And I expect that we'll continue to look at doing that because it allows people the opportunity and the access, that we're really, really committed to.
That's interesting. I mean, have you started to see, you're only a year into your position, so I give you a caveat with that, right? But maybe a two-part question with that. One is, what have you seen first coming into a utility, having been in other positions, CSR types of positions in the pharmaceutical space or in other industries? What were some of the things that were different coming into a utility, if anything at all? I just pharmaceuticals, utilities, it's all corporate structures and those sorts of things. But was there any sort of different ethos or practices that you saw that were different coming into a totally different industry?
It's a really good question. And I'd have to reflect on that a little bit because I always start sort of on that common narrative of essential service.
Right.
But the business model is entirely different. And I would also say that the sense of duty is different. We actually have a very high percentage of veterans in our workforce.
At the utility.
Yeah. And a lot of that is because transitioning to the utility is not unlike, and now I've never served active duty military, but I understand that it's not unlike some of that mission focused work in the military.
Sure. So
I've been really drawn to that at our company. The people at Duquesne Light are really proud of what they do, as they should be. So that's one unique aspect of the utility industry that I've found.
So the type of work.
I think the type of work, and the sense of commitment to it.
We just to that point, we have a partnership that we've developed at S&B with a company called AmeriCrew, and I'm happy to share kind of the contact information for. But AmeriCrew, exactly to your point, is taking veterans who are transitioning from military service, the U.S. Armed Service branches, and introducing them into the broadband industry and renewable energy and electrification of vehicles. And it's exactly what you're talking about. It's like the mindset, the understanding of kind of duty and mission, purpose, and they're seeing this really great ability for them to veterans to transition into kind of those spaces.
I'd love the contact information. It sounds very aligned.
Yeah, very aligned. But then the difference in the pharmaceutical space, I guess. What was different type of skill set or...
I would say, so I guess not so much focused on mission there because it's equally essential, but maybe more if I could comment on the difference between the business models. So my entire career I've spent in large global publicly traded companies that are facing different pressures on a quarter-to-quarter basis. Yep. And we could weave in the ESG topic of conversation there around ESG investing and an increasing focus from Wall Street on topics related to a company's ESG performance and strategy. Duquesne Light is a privately held company. And so, I believe that puts us in a unique position to focus on creating long-term value, not just for our shareholders, but also for those that we're serving in the community. So rather than a difference in mission or commitment to that, it's more the business model difference is really interesting to me.
Because your geography's fixed.
Your geography's fixed, but, I'm more along the lines of privately held companies having the ability to be longer term focused in their investments.
That's fascinating.
Because their equities
quarter to quarter.
Exactly, their equities aren't being traded on a day-to-day basis.
That brings up kind of another question we had there is that you see we talked about the advent early on in ESG and CSR and the terms of the time and the day, but you're also seeing a lot of this come under pressure. Whether it's from the investment side or pushback from public officials, or just kind of conversations in the media. I guess one deep question is, why do you think that is? Having a very early experience in the media, but also like at the core, this is these are companies who are rooted in doing well by doing good or doing good by doing well. I never get that right. But the idea of this is part of our purpose. To serve a community, to do the right thing, to help our community, not just in terms of being a customer, but this also might be a future employee or building our workforce and ultimately building a region. I don't know if you have thoughts on that.
Yeah, good business is good business.
Right.
And that's what it boils down to. And the polarized environment from a media perspective and a political perspective that we're living in today can be so counterproductive to a group of humans who are essentially trying to do a good thing
and trying to keep the lights on.
We're providing an essential service. I do think that some level of healthy skepticism around ESG investing in companies' marketing around their ESG strategy is appropriate and acceptable. And it's why, years ago, countries like France and other European markets that are far ahead of us in their understanding and articulation of these topics actually passed legislation that made greenwashing, the idea of using your ESG strategy to sort of sell products and services in a way that may not be fully factual or appropriate, made it illegal and punishable by law.
Right.
So, where that's coming from may be more politically driven or the fact that, the media is so divided today. But if the outcome of that is some level of skepticism around companies' commitments and sort of marketing in this space, I think that's okay because companies need to be true and need to be real about the role that they play.
How are you doing that? I mean, you're early on in your position, and how are you starting to shape that up in terms of both the measurement of outcomes, but also the transparency? Like, how are you approaching that as part of your position?
Well, first of all, we're in touch regularly, constantly with our community partners in defining what the material topics are for our company to deliver on. If we're not aligned, what's important, what matters. And an important stakeholder in that is our ownership, our leadership, and our employees as well, because it needs to matter both for the company's bottom line in a positive way, but also make a difference for society. And so we kind of map that out on a matrix in the ESG space. You may be familiar. This process is called a materiality assessment process, where you have that conversation and literally understand what are we going after as a company. And from there, I think looking to industry benchmarks and best practices to say, okay, how can we consistently measure our performance against our peers? How can we be transparent in our disclosure of that performance, putting long-term goals out there and showing how we're advancing over time.
Are you seeing a difference between going back to kind of there's publicly traded utilities and then Duquesne's an investor-owned utility, right? Differences in terms of how they're held and how they're organized?
Yeah, it's a good question. And they all sort of fall in the bucket of investor-owned utilities. The question is exactly
who's
as you say, who's the investor? Are they publicly traded or are you privately held? And I would say the benefits of the difference in the publicly traded space is an interest to show progress, not just in the financials of the company, but in public commitments quarter by quarter. And so there may be a different level of scrutiny on those commitments. We certainly report regularly for the publicly traded ones. We certainly report regularly to our board on our progress. So it's not that we're not facing the same pressures. It's just a different governance construct.
Is it refreshing? I don't know if that's the right word, but the difference between having the ability to have that longer term time horizon, like you talked about being in a privately held utility, versus the quarterly the quarterly grind or quarterly pressures of a publicly traded company? What's that difference look like? I don't want to say if it's better or worse, but like,
well,
is there a difference?
I can comment on the fact that, the public markets are seeing fewer IPOs these days, and they're seeing, a fewer number of publicly traded companies, I think in large part because of the pressure that the markets are placing on
the risk rewards.
On the risk rewards, exactly. So, and while I feel that the SEC's attention as an example on this topic is and I'm referring specifically to their proposed rulemaking around the enhanced disclosure of greenhouse gas emissions and other climate risks and opportunities for publicly traded companies, SEC registrants. I think the intent behind that to increase transparency and disclosure is good, but on the flip side, it disincentivizes companies from, being publicly traded in the first place.
Right. So there's a double-edged sword in terms of like the transparency side of it.
That's right.
I think though too, you're seeing this coming from a privately held company as well. Like leadership matters so much in terms of understanding and setting that North Star and direction, and why a CSR program, for example, is so important to a company, right? Because it's not just about the bottom line, but these things influence the bottom line, right? Are you seeing that as part of kind of that process in terms of outcomes and direction, in terms of these investments you're making in the community? How does that really affect the company, I guess?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I think back to as I was joining the company, a new leadership team is sort of being formed and built, and when Kevin Walker, our CEO, initiated a new vision for the company focused on a clean energy future for all. That's a real rallying cry that is very aligned with...
Gives you that North Star.
It gives you that North Star. And, our vision for the company's ESG strategy is the same vision that the company holistically has. If it didn't, I'd be concerned.
For sure.
And so I'm very excited about that. I'm very excited about how our ESG strategy is being interwoven, very explicitly within the company's corporate strategy. So I think that leadership and that North Star alignment goes without saying that it's one and the same if the company's going to advance.
That's awesome. Just coming up against time, one final question for you, Christine. What's up ahead, and what excites you on the horizon here for Duquesne Light and for yourself personally and professionally in your role?
For myself personally and professionally, I couldn't be more thrilled to be with a company like Duquesne Light that is so committed to doing good for the communities and customers that it serves. I think the ways that we are going to continue to show up in the community with this new vision of a clean energy future for all are going to continue to be increasingly meaningful. We just came off of the Global Clean Energy Action Forum.
Exciting, yeah.
We've got more plans in place to continue building out product and service offerings for our customers to enable their clean energy journey. So it's an exciting time to be with this company. Yeah. It's an exciting time to be in Pittsburgh. It's an exciting time to be in the energy industry. So I see lots of upside ahead.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. Thank you for being a guest here on the Dirt Podcast.
Thank you for having me.
And thank you for the work that you do and helping to keep the lights on.
Yeah.
We appreciate it. And thank you guys for listening in to the Dirt Podcast. I want to thank Anthony and Gary and Wayne, our production team, for helping produce such a great episode here for you all today. And thanks again to Christine Waller from Duquesne Light. And thank you for listening to the Dirt Podcast, and we'll check you out on the next episode. Thanks so much.